In the previous episode, we found that Diana was able to get the Book of Life, but now it's damaged all thanks to Kelly. However, while her mind is stuck with the Book of Life, a problem is awaiting her with a gun in one hand and murder in her eyes. What will Diana do when she finds out she is alone with an insane person who wants to end her life? Will she cry like before, or will she call her inner fire? After an adventurous and tiring journey, Diana and Matthew are back at their home along with their adoptive son Jack. Diana is still having trouble reading and understanding the Book of Life, and this is frustrating for her. Back at Oxford, she was able to feel the connection with the book, but now after all she had been through, the book refused to let her in as if she was a stranger. On the other hand, Matthew is extremely worried about the mess that has been piling up in England. He knows that the Queen is angry at him for not fulfilling his promise of bringing Kelly back and that this time he will not be able to manipulate the Queen in his favor. While they both are brimming with stress, they do not share their battle with each other and instead focus on the one good thing in their life, Jack. Apparently, Diana and Matthew have decided to adopt Jack unofficially because they fell in love with the little boy. However, as Diana sees Jack, she realizes that she will eventually have to leave him alone in this century and go back home. She shares this concern with Matthew, who feels the same pain, but he assures Diana that Jack will be with his new foster parents, who will take good care of him. Diana is not satisfied with the answer, but she knows she cannot do anything more than this. Later, Matthew accompanies Diana back to Goody Alsop's workshop, where she can continue perfecting her magic. However, Susanna meets the couple outdoors and tells them that Goody is not feeling too well. But upon seeing Diana alive and healthy, Goody perks up. She then informs Diana that the witch hunts have spread throughout the country, and only 2 of them are the last surviving witches of their kind. Diana gets visibly upset at the situation. After all, no one likes when their kind is brutally murdered for being special. Goody then says that Matthew looks less troubled than he was when he left, and Diana smugly looks at him. However, Goody says that she feels a change in Diana as well and slowly starts to scan her from head to toe. But as she reaches her belly, she gasps as if she knows something different. Diana looks at her expectantly because she feels the same sensation as Goody. They both realize at the same time that Diana is pregnant, and Matthew's face shifts from blank to shock and then to confusion. Vampires cannot conceive, and him getting Diana pregnant is as rare as interspecies relationships. But it's not impossible. Diana and Matthew go back home to process the information. Diana is confused but also happy after the news, and Matthew, being the paranoid and pessimistic he is, says that they need to go back in their timeline as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Matthew has been called by the Queen to answer for his lack of duty, and he has to leave Diana back at her magic academy so that she can be protected while he is busy coddling the Queen. On the way, Kit meets Matthew and asks if he is done playing games with the witch. Matthew might be a level-headed person in the 21st century, but the 16th century Matthew Roydon must not be toyed with. He pushes Kit in a threatening manner and says that no one can separate Diana from him as long as they are both alive. Kit takes great offense to this, but at the same time, he loves Matthew too much to harm him, at least physically. His expression turns from sadness to devilish as he forms a plan in his mind. On the other hand, Matthew meets Cecil, who smugly says that the Queen's mood is worsened by her toothache, and that he will have to suffer double wrath today. And it was true, the Queen was extremely distressed due to her tooth and angrily asked Matthew why he did not bring Kelly and instead chose a useless book. Matthew has no answer to it, but he lies that even the book was stolen from him during the journey back. Cecil does not believe him and asks the Queen for permission to search his house. She approves his request and asks Matthew to stay back while his house is being searched. Matthew knows that he has completely lost the trust of the Queen and her advisor, and the manipulation of his words will not work here. So, he abides by her order and waits for the inevitable coming towards him. Meanwhile, Diana has a rather productive day. She has now learned to tie the knot till the 7th, which means she is only 3 knots away from becoming the greatest weaver who ever lived. As she is practicing in front of Goody, a fire escapes from her belly and turns into a phoenix bird. The bird, in a secret voice, tells her that its name is Cora, and Diana whispers something to it. He then goes back to her midsection, where he emerged from, and leaves Diana eternally confused. Goody, who is amused seeing all of this, tells Diana that the bird is her familiar who will help her in her time of need. Diana suddenly feels confident in herself. She now knows that even if Matthew is not with her, she is capable enough to fight any threat that comes to her and her unborn child. Satisfied, she leaves for her home, but Kit stops her. He looks quite distressed and panicked, and upon seeing him, Diana immediately knows that something is wrong with Matthew. She hurriedly follows him after he tells her that the Queen has detained Matthew for his crimes. While Matthew and Diana are busy involuntarily saving each other, Cecil searches their house for the book. He even cruelly asks Jack to give him his diary, which Diana gifted him, and the poor boy has to comply. He then goes to Diana and Matthew's room but cannot find anything. But as soon as he turns to go back, the floorboard creaks, and he finds a book hidden underneath it. He realizes that this must be the book, given how it was hidden, so he devilishly grins and keeps the book in a chest. However, as he gets out of the house, Gallowglass stops him and asks what he is doing. Cecil's attention is disturbed by the scary-looking man, and in that time, Jack smartly changes the Book of Life with an ordinary book. Meanwhile, Matthew decides that it is time to tell the Queen the truth. He bites his finger, draws blood, and offers it to the Queen. Suddenly, her toothache vanishes and half of her troubles seem to disappear. Matthew knows that the best way to make the Queen understand him is by telling her the truth. So, he starts with Diana being the time spinner and him coming from the future. He assures that her monarch will be the most remembered one in the history of England, and that all her worries are just small disturbances in the timeline. This visibly relaxes the Queen, and she thanks Matthew for eliminating her fears. She is so in a trance that she lets him go even when Cecil panically says that no book was found. Matthew goes straight to his home, and Jack gives him the book with a small smile on his lips. Matthew becomes proud of his son for this little act of bravery and thanks him for it. Jack perks up upon hearing the compliment, but their moment is interpreted when Gallowglass informs that Diana is missing. Matthew stands abruptly and goes to find the love of his life. On the other hand, Kit brings Diana to a dark dungeon. But as soon as they enter, Diana can feel something is off. Instead of Matthew, Louisa is awaiting them, with a smirk and evil glint in her eyes. Diana momentarily gets shocked by betrayal and looks at Kit with the "how dare you." Kit looks ashamed, but he immediately tells Louisa that it's time to sail Diana away. But Louisa cuts him off, saying that the witch had bewitched her brother, so there is no other way to kill her. They both put Diana into chains and try to persuade them for her freedom. Diana knows about Louisa and does not want to hurt either of them, so she pulls out the Philippe and Matthew card. She tells them that Philippe made her his blood-sworn daughter and was the one who officiated their marriage. Louisa is shocked hearing this and goes on to check the authenticity of her words. But she still insists on ending her life, now more than before. But Diana starts reciting poetry from Kit's unpublished work. She entices him by saying she will tell him about his future, but Louisa knocks him off with a gun. She aims at Diana, and her trembling hands show that she is unsure of her decision. The first time, she misses, and seeing her nerve, Diana unleashes Cora from her. The bird goes on to encircle the two kidnappers, and Diana frees herself from the chains. She is now quite angry at them and ignites a circle of fire around them. But as she is about to attack them, Matthew and Gallowglass come running and panting as if he had been running for a while now. Matthew is enraged seeing his ex-friend and sister behind all of this, but he has more important matters to deal with. He knows that Diana is not a cold-blooded murders killer like him, so if she kills any one of her kidnappers, she will regret it later on. He calls on her by saying she needs to let go since their futures are more daunting than the current punishment. Diana looks at Matthew and has a silent battle through her eyes. She finally lets them go and Matthew captures both perpetrators and tells them that they will regret their mistake later on. Diana, by now, has been used to dealing with all the people who wronged her. After all, this is the second time she was kidnapped. She leaves hand in hand with Matthew and goes home to Jack. This was quite an important event since it showed how Diana had changed in previous years, from being a damsel in distress who needed Matthew to save her, to becoming an independent woman who can protect and defend herself. And we cannot be more proud of her. Diana and Matthew have endured too much ever since they traveled back in time. At the same time, they have also gained benefits from it. For starters, they got Jack, who soon became the light of their lives, and secondly, they finally worked their issues together and got stronger than ever. Now that they have found the Book of Life and Diana has learned more about her magic, it's time for them to go back home. But this time even messier situations are awaiting them at home. Diana is at Goody's workshop practicing the final knots but is having trouble turning the ninth one. Goody hints that Diana is trying hard not to tie the knot because she knows she will have to leave once she masters her knot. Diana realizes it's true and sighs in resignation. Goody says that it's time for a break, but soon her expression changes, and she states that she can feel a weaver coming to London. Diana is confused by the revelation, but since she does not have such advanced power, she cannot find the weaver. And honestly, it's not the priority for her either. On her way back home, she stops Matthew and starts buying a new book for Jack since Cecil took the last one. But as she is busy finding a book, Matthew smells an unusual smell, and his face turns to confusion. He says he smelled coffee, and he follows the scent to a man. He corners him and looks at his face, but Diana loudly calls the man before Matthew can recognize him. The man, or should we say, Stephen, is in the 16th century, going for another of his time travel expeditions. Stephen oddly recognizes his now grown daughter and is confused but also amazed after seeing her. They both take him home so that Diana can have more time with her father, and they can get more answers. Stephen is a little bit uncomfortable seeing Diana so grown up after he just left her as a child in his world. He then sees Jack and realizes that Diana has been here for a while to adopt a kid. But as he is about to ask about him, Matthew quickly cuts to the chase. He asks what Stephen was doing in the 16th century. Stephen says that he is an anthropologist and is here to observe the past and look for Ashmole 782. Diana quickly tells him that she has the book with her and he can take a look at it since she has a hard time understanding it. He says that he has been trying to locate and read the book when it is not damaged, but even in this timeline, it cannot be understood. While Stephen is focused on the book, Diana attentively looks at her father as if he will disappear again. She immediately warns him about Peter Knox, saying that he has been harassing her, and Stephen confirms that Knox has always been on the dark side. Talking about Knox, the devil in the shape of a witch tells Gerbert that little Margaret was, in fact, a witch, and the covenant has been broken the second time. Meanwhile, Gerbert says that he knows about the witches living in Septours. Knox knows what he has to do, so he leaves for France to retrieve the witches and possibly find out more about the Book of Life. Meanwhile, Issa is having dinner with all the guests, including Agatha and her family. Everyone pretends to be happy, but they all are worried about the inevitable future. Marcus lightly says that no one is safe until the covenant is broken or updated. Phoebe then chips in and says that the covenant has already been challenged with the gathering. She mentions that this might be the first time demons, witches, vampires, and humans were sitting together in harmony, and this is a great step towards the change. Issa looks at her with a glint in her eyes because she realizes that she is a fighter. Back in London in 1592, Stephen finally tells the couple the hard truth. He says that they both cannot toy with magic in time, and he says that this version of Ashmole 782 will stay in this timeline. Diana is heartbroken since half their efforts were for the book and now they are in vain. But she understands the gravity of the situation and does not push the matter any further. She takes Stephen to Goody and shows how much she has learned here. Stephen is equally amazed and stunned by the type of power his daughter has. Goody realizes that Diana must need some alone time with her dad, so she says her final goodbyes and leaves. After her departure, Diana breaks down into tears and says that she misses her parents too much. Stephen says that they both always knew their time with Diana was destined to be cut short, but this does not mean they would not be there to protect her. Diana finally hugs him hard and lets her emotions flow and convey her sadness. After her goodbye to her father, Diana returns to her house and then leaves for her academy to say her final words to Goody Allsoap. Gallowglass follows her, but she stops him outside. However, she is not here to meet Goody since she already sent her regards to her beforehand. Instead, Father Hubbard is waiting for her there. Apparently, Diana thinks that Jack will need extra protection, and what better than the coven of a vampire? She says that she will only give him a drop of her blood, and he will have to protect Jack for life. Hubbard is too thirsty for a taste of her and agrees. After their agreement, Diana leaves for her house, where she tearily says her final goodbyes to Jack. The poor boy knew that something was wrong, and he did not want to leave his parents. He tries to wiggle out and go back to the crying Diana and teary-eyed Matthew, but Francois takes him away. Meanwhile, Knox arrives at the Septours and sees Emily alone at the ruined temple doing dark magic. He sees that she was successful in emerging Rebecca from the ashes, and he leans in to get a good look at the woman he loved. However, sensing something is wrong, Emily dissolves the shadow and looks behind her. Knox finally emerges from the shadows and asks Em to give him the paper from the book, but she is quick to hide it. Em is caught by surprise, and Knox uses it to his advantage. He grabs Em's head and hurts her to the point that she screams in pain. On the other hand, Sarah and the rest of the crew realize that something is wrong. Sarah figures out it must have to do with Em since the paper of the Book of Life is missing. But by the time she reaches Em, it's too late. Knox has already left Em unconscious and fighting for her life. Sarah wails and calls Em to wake up, but all her answers are in vain because Em does not even flutter her eyes open.